Good old sequels to hit movies. Sometimes they're really, really good, and sometimes they're mediocre, and sometimes they're just terrible. Let's get into one right now. And the sequel we're going to talk about today, welcome back to my channel by the way, is RoboCop 2. RoboCop 2 came out in June of 1990. I actually talked my parents into taking me to see this in the movies that summer. So I did get to see this in the theaters. I was only 11 years old. Yes, some people might think that's too young, but I had already seen R-rated movies way before that. So I was up for the challenge. It's rated R. It's an hour and 57 minutes long. And this movie had a budget of $25 million, which is a pretty big budget back then. And it grossed 45 upon release, which wasn't quite as much as the original film. Now, after the success of the first RoboCop, the studio wanted Paul Verhoeven and Ed Neumeier to come back right away and make a sequel. And I guess the studio must have expressed the kind of sequel they wanted, but Paul Verhoeven was not interested in the sequel, the kind of sequel that the studio wanted. And Ed Neumeier had started writing a script, and he had an idea for it. And it kind of was, from what I gather from interviews I've seen, in the beginning of the film, RoboCop would get destroyed and be resurrected 25 years later into the future. But the script wasn't ready, and the studio wanted to get going because Orion was cash-strapped at this point, and they needed a hit movie. They had several failures, and they needed a movie to be a big hit. Since the first movie was a hit, they assumed a sequel would be, so they wanted two sequels. Well, Verhoeven and Ed Neumeier, Verhoeven went on to direct Total Recall and didn't come back, and Neumeier didn't come back. Enter Frank Miller. Now, I'm not a big comic book fan, but Frank Miller is huge, highly regarded in the comic book field, and he actually came in to write the script for RoboCop 2. Not only did he write the script, but they went on to a director called Tim Hunter. I am not familiar with this gentleman, and he was assigned to direct this film, but he dropped out. And 2 weeks until they were getting ready to start production, they decided to go with Irvin Kershner. Now, that name should be familiar to movie geeks because the gentleman directed Empire Strikes Back, which is my favorite Star Wars film of all time, and I know a lot of other people consider that one the best one of all the films. He also directed the James Bond movie, Never Say Never Again, and he directed other films as well during his career. But he hadn't directed anything in a little bit, and he took the job, but he only had 2 weeks of pre-production before they were getting ready to shoot in Houston, Texas. He came in, and it was a run-and-gun kind of scenario. They had a release date in mind. They wanted the film done by a certain point. So this was definitely a rush production, and they threw $25 million at it. Well, anyway, Peter Weller was back as RoboCop. Nancy Allen came back as Ann Lewis. Dan O'Hurley came back as the old man, the gentleman who's in charge of OCP, Omni Consumer Products. Felton Perry came back as Johnson. He was in the first movie, and this movie has a little bit more to do. He's kind of the old man's right-hand man now. He took over Dick Jones's job, kind of, because he's always with the old man at all times. And he's kind of his conscience, even though the old man doesn't listen to him too much. And then we have Tom Noonan came in as the main bad guy, Kane, and he is this drug dealer who distributes this drug called Nuke. And that is our cast of this film. And this film, right away I'll say, when I was a kid, I loved this film. When I saw it in the theaters, and even for years in the 90s, I really liked this film. Last Night was the first time I've seen this film in probably about 10 years, from start to finish. I just picked up the Scream Factory Blu-ray release, the special edition, and it's really well done. It's a great transfer. So watching the movie again, basically we pick up a couple years later after the first film. OCP still in charge of the police department, and we find out that the city of Detroit owes them like $30-some million, and if they don't pay this debt, OCP can foreclose on them and take over the city. They'll own the city. And then they can start their building of Delta City like they planned in the first film. Well, the mayor, who we actually get in a little bit of politics of it, the mayor is in this film. We see the mayor. He goes and meets with the old man at OCP headquarters. They have a very... they're not friendly to each other because the mayor can't pay the debt, and he thinks it's bullshit that this corporation is going to foreclose on the city and take the city out from underneath regular people to build these high-rise buildings. And so he's pissed off and trying to find an avenue to pay the debt. And he has like a telethon. It's really cheesy, over the top when they show it. And eventually he goes somewhere else. We'll get into that. So RoboCop's still doing his thing, stopping crimes. And in the beginning of the film, the first act of the film, we see him driving to his wife's new house and sitting like a little bit down the street watching, and she knows he's there. And she's creeped out by this. Well, she hires a lawyer and is going to sue the city because she feels harassed, and she just got over her husband dying, and now this robot who used to be her husband, which I don't set up if she knows it used to be her husband or not. I assume she knows that, but they never go into it. And we have a scene where this lawyer from OCP is telling RoboCop, "What are you? Who are you?" And he keeps saying, "I'm Murphy." And the lawyer keeps pressing him, and finally he goes, "I'm RoboCop. I'm just a machine." And the wife comes in. They leave them alone, and the wife comes in. And it's a brief scene, and she's crying. She goes, "Don't you remember me?" And he's like, "This is what they did to memorialize your husband, but I don't know you. I'm just a robot." And she leaves, and she's crying out by the car. Now, I think where the sequel kind of goes, they actually had an opportunity, a very good opportunity, to further explore that angle, but it stops right there, and it never comes back again. Once his wife leaves, we see her on the street talking to her lawyer. She's crying. She gets in her car and takes off. They never go back to that the rest of the film. And it's kind of odd because they set it up in the first film, and in this film, it's just like an abrupt, that's it. And it's unceremoniously dumped, and we never talk about it again through the rest of the film. Well, moving on, besides that, that's one of my problems with this sequel. I think that would have been an interesting place to explore his psychological profile a little bit more and what's going on with his wife. Obviously, they can't have a relationship. He's a robot. But I think it would have been interesting to explore those ideas, and they just dump it and move on to a more action-oriented movie. And RoboCop is after this drug dealer named Kane. And the citizens of Detroit are hooked on this drug called Nuke that it's a real problem. And RoboCop goes and tries to bust this where producing this drug, and we get a cameo. Well, not yet, but we get a cameo by Frank Miller later on. I'm skipping ahead of myself. He goes in, they set up a trap for him, they catch him, and they cut him into pieces and dump him right in front of the police station. Meanwhile, at OCP, they're trying to develop a new RoboCop 2, a newer, better version of RoboCop. And Johnson and his team have developed different robots, and none of them last at all. And this woman named Juliet Fox, played by Belinda Bauer, who's in this film, who is like a psychologist or something, comes up with an idea for a new robot. And her idea is to use criminals instead of cops. And Johnson thinks she's batshit crazy, but she's in bed with the old man. Literally, she's kind of sleeping her way to the top. So the old man's listening to her and ignores Johnson. And this is where we get our major crux. RoboCop gets rebuilt. And at first, they kind of give him new directives, so he's kind of like pussified. Like, he doesn't want to do, like, he's not really stopping crime. He's just giving speeches and that. And finally, he electrocutes himself to get all that bad stuff out. And he goes after Kane, and Kane ends up getting hurt really bad and in the hospital. Well, she comes in and she kills Kane so she could use his brain for this new robot called RoboCop 2. And we get this scene where the mayor, this little kid, this is another point of contention for this film, I'll talk about it in a minute. This little kid works with Kane, and he's a loudmouth, foul-mouthed little prick of a kid. And he proposes to the mayor that he'll give him $50 million to cover the city's debt if he allows him to distribute his drugs, which the people want. He sells it like a salesman. I'm not forcing anybody to buy it. You leave us alone, and I'll make sure your streets are safe as well. But you got to let me make money, and you can have your city back. And the mayor's going to take it. Like, this mayor wants his city back, and the kid talks him into it. He's about to say yes when the new RoboCop 2 shows up and pretty much kills everybody except for the mayor. He gets away. He kills everybody else. And when our final battle is at OCP headquarters, because they're announcing their new city they're going to build. They have a big model that comes up out of the floor. RoboCop 2, they introduce them. The problem with this robot is it's addicted to nuke. That's how Juliet Fox gets the robot to do whatever she wants, promise of more drugs. And the old man's giving a speech, and he pulls out the nuke, and we're going to stop this from poisoning our citizens and taking over our streets. And the robot goes nuts and starts killing people. RoboCop shows up. We have a robot battle royale for the last 10 minutes of the film. RoboCop eventually kills Kane, and that's the end of the film. And that is RoboCop 2. Now, back to that kid. That kid shows up a couple times throughout the movie. But then at this scene where he's propositioning the mayor about helping him pay off the city debts, there's a moment where the kid gets shot, because Kane shoots him, or RoboCop 2 shoots him. And he's in the back of this armored truck, and RoboCop says, "I'll get you help." And the kid, it's almost like this kid's been a little prick the whole time, an evil little bastard, and they ask you to be sympathetic for him in the last second. Now, we don't really know anything about this kid other than he's a evil little dick. But they want us to feel bad for him in these moments. And I just think it's a waste of a character. It's a character they could have cut out. I don't know, but I would assume that filmmakers wanted to show you how low society has gone, because there's another scene during the film where this Little League team is robbing this electronics store with the coach, has a gun, and I think that's what they're trying to convey across, is how low society has gone, where they don't give a shit as long as they can get something for themselves. But it's just a character that doesn't need to be there. It doesn't work. There's another character that doesn't need to be in this film either. Now, according to the interviews I saw, he had more of a role, but there's a dirty cop in this film who gives information to Kane that helps set up RoboCop. But his character is they didn't even need him to be there. It's a totally useless character. Now, from what everybody said, there was more to him in the script, but they cut it out. The script by Frank Miller got rewritten and rewritten constantly. They said Frank Miller would be on set writing pages and handing them off, and the next day they'd be doing those pages. They kept requesting rewrites after rewrite after rewrite. So this film was tore apart, rewritten, and pasted back together as they went along. And like I said, they only had 2 weeks of pre-production, which is not much for a film of this size. I mean, $25 million in 1990 was a hefty size budget. And for what they had to get done with the effects and that, the effects, RoboCop still looks cool. The RoboCop 2 looks cool. Although some of the effects, the green screen stuff, does not look that great, especially in high def. But there's still enough there. The action's well shot. I mean, Irvin Kershner was not a bad director, obviously. The man directed Empire Strikes Back. And that movie's fantastic. But it's just not as good as the first film. It doesn't have that zip that Paul Verhoeven had on the first film. There's still a lot to like here, but the movie also drags a little bit during the middle section. I don't know why. When RoboCop gets his other which is another waste of time. They give him these new directives, turn him into like a pussycat, and it's over like that. Like, we get a couple small scenes of him not being effective as a lawman, and then he electrocutes himself, and that's it. It's over. And it's like, why do we even go there? It was a waste of time. I mean, this movie is a little bit longer than the first one, and that was at least 5-10 minutes they could have shaved off this film. It's absolutely pointless. There was no reason to do it, but they did it, and I think it slows the movie down. Honestly, if they would have cut those 10 minutes out, they would have picked up the pace a little bit to get us to our ending. But now, Tom Noonan as the bad guy, he's good. All the actors do fine. They're all good here. It's just that the movie's just not as good as the original. It pales in comparison. Yes, they tried to amp up the action, but I'd even contend, even though Irvin Kershner does a nice job shooting the action, it's not as good as the first film. The first film was shot better. It was a better made film, I would say. But it's still a decent sequel. Unfortunately, with RoboCop 3, what was directed by a guy I really like, and Fred Decker, who did Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad. But that movie's a dumpster fire. It's awful. I don't like that movie at all, so I'm not going to review it. I'm just doing the first two movies. I would give RoboCop 2 a 7 out of 10. It's nowhere near as good as the first one, but it's still a decent sequel. There's some nice action sequences. All the actors do fine. But there's problems. There's characters that don't need to be there. They slow the movie down into this stupid side plot of RoboCop getting new directives and acting not a very effective lawman. But everything else is still there. The social commentary on corporations, all that kind of stuff is still in this film. I don't think it's not as well done as the first film, but it's all there. It's still there. If you liked it in the first one, it's still there in this one. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for RoboCop 2. What are your thoughts on this sequel to RoboCop 1? I think it's okay. Leave your comment down below. Let me know what you think of this sequel. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I greatly appreciate it. You all have a great day. Stay safe, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.